What's up guys, I'm Phil. Welcome back to Filling You In, where today we're going to be talking about this thing. It's HP Spectre X360 14-inch laptop. And if you're into style aesthetics when you like to buy your tech products, well frankly, you're not going to find a simply put better looking laptop available right now. Now there's a silver option available, but the model we've got here is the Nightfall Black with copper accents all over, alongside the trim of the laptop, the hinges, even on the actual edge of the trackpad itself. Regardless of the color you've chosen, we get the super sweet diamond cut edges all around the trim. The attention to detail here is incredible. Hell, it's that good looking, I might elope with this thing. In terms of the more practical design though, this thing has an anodized aluminium finish, which means it should be quite hard wearing and durable, but is highly prone to fingerprints, so that's something that annoys you. It's something you should keep in mind. Inside, the quality is more of the same. We have a reasonably large trackpad, which is nice and accurate, although I wasn't particularly impressed with kind of the down click motion that you get with it. I'm coming off the back of using a Macbook Air though, which is frankly the best trackpad you can get. They probably could have made the trackpad a touch larger, but what they've opted to do instead is put quite a large speaker system at the top end of the keyboard deck, just below the monitor. And what's more, they've also provided two additional speakers on the left and right side of the keyboard as well, which actually surprisingly do a good job of not getting drowned out by the underside of a table. HP have actually partnered with Bang & Olufsen to help try and tune the speakers on this HP Spectre, and they've done a really good job. They're superbly well equalized out of the box. But if you feel like this is going to be a full-blown B&O sound experience, then you're going to be sadly disappointed. Similar principle to what we've maybe seen on the OnePlus 9 camera and their partnership with Hasselblad. And on that note, get subscribed if you haven't already, because my review of the OnePlus 9 Pro is coming up next week. As far as the keyboard goes, I didn't actually get on too well with the HP Spectre. The keys have a reasonable amount of travel, actually a pretty good amount of travel, but they're not particularly tactile. What's more, it took me a couple of days to get up to speed and I couldn't quite clock why, and eventually realised actually it was the presence of the home, page up and page down buttons on the right side of the laptop, which left the rest of the keyboard deck feeling a little bit left of centre. That being said, once I got up to speed, it was a perfectly pleasant typing experience. The keyboard does have a few nice features though, so a fingerprint reader, Windows Hello automatic login, and actually some function keys which allow you to enable or disable your webcam and your microphone with a handy LED light which tells you whether or not it's engaged. And this is an example of HP Spectre's 720p webcam which comes included. Unsurprisingly, it's pretty poor, like most 720p webcams are. Things get quite grainy. I've deliberately turned off the studio lights and switched on the room lighting as well, so it's more closer to your likely working conditions. That being said, the microphone on this thing isn't too bad, and the webcam itself does support Windows Hello facial recognition. On the I/O and ports front, HP have actually done a really good job. So we have ourselves a USB Type A port on the left side, so you won't be forced into living that dongle life anytime soon, which is great. And on the right side, we have a micro SD card reader. There, we have a headphone jack and two USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 compatible ports. And what's more, one of those USB-C ports has actually been engineered into that 45-degree angle at the back of the laptop. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether there's a practical purpose behind that, but if you're into aesthetics, as I said earlier, it's a really nice touch. That being said, I would have preferred to have seen one of those USB-C ports actually on the left-hand side of the laptop. That really helps when you're plugging it into charge. You're not having to drape cables around depending on where your power outlet is. The model I've got here is a 1080p IPS panel with reasonably thin bezels on the sides and top, albeit still a little bit chunky on the bottom. It'll output 400 nits of peak brightness, which is perfectly acceptable, but at this price point for a premium grade laptop, I'd really expect us to see 500 nits of peak brightness as the standard. Returning subscribers will know how much I like to bang on about aspect ratios on laptops, and HP Spectre is no exception. Well, no exception in the sense of they've done a good job. So normally I like to see a 16:10 aspect ratio, which means you get a bit more vertical headroom. HP have gone one step further and given us a 3:2, which means you get even more vertical space, which is great for productivity tasks. People who are into artworking will be really impressed with the HP Spectre. Firstly, that 3:2 aspect ratio offers relatively similar dimensions to A4 paper. This is a 2-in-1 laptop, which means it is touch sensitive all over and can invert on itself. Also has 100% coverage of the sRGB color spectrum. And just to sweeten the deal, HP have included a pen. Now guys, I'm far from a digital art worker, but as far as the pre-packaged pens I've used with laptops, this one from HP is probably the best. It has a nice weight to it. Its latency when interacting with the screen is really low, and its accuracy feels pretty good as well. Because of the size of this thing, there's no option to actually house it inside the laptop itself, say unlike the Lenovo Yoga. But as a nice touch from HP, the pen is magnetic and it will securely, or reasonably securely, attach to the left side of your laptop like so. Battery life was about middle of the road. For a thin and light laptop, after about 7.5 hours of use, this thing was only down to about 23%, which was particularly impressive. It seems well optimized for light loads, but when I booted this thing up in the evening to use Premiere Pro for some editing, I found that 23% vanished inside about an hour. So I think you're going to get the better part of 9 to 10 mixed use hours out of this thing before you're going to need to plug it back into the walls. As far as the internal components of this thing goes, we've got Intel's 11th gen 1165 G7, 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage, and its performance is largely in line with its position within Intel's hierarchy of notebook CPUs, but notably performed better than the same specification LG Gram 14, and it was largely the same story in Geekbench as well. And in a 4K render test in DaVinci Resolve, it performed impressively well versus some of the other Intel thin and light laptops, completing in around about 20 minutes. Moving swiftly onto the graphical performance of this, in the 14-inch model, there's no option for a discrete dedicated graphics card. There is on the 15-inch model, so you may want to explore that, but that's not a crying shame. All of Intel's 11th gen CPUs come with their integrated Iris Xe graphics, which is a massive step up over the prior generation. And if we compare that in benchmark tests, looking at Geekbench, it performs largely in line with the other Intel Iris Xe graphics chipsets in other thin and light laptops. And same can be said for the suite of tests in Luxmark as well, where it's largely par the course with the rest of its competitors. Now on the gaming front, if you're into AAA titles playing at high frames per second, well, the Intel Iris Xe graphics simply isn't going to achieve that for you. But if you like older games, or you're happy to play esports titles on low to medium settings, then you should be able to operate in and around 50 to 60 frames per second, depending on the game of choice. And when putting this thing under load, fan noise was perfectly acceptable, and whilst the laptop got noticeably warm when under sustained load, it was far from hot, so actually quite a comfortable all-round laptop to use. So to wrap this thing up, HP have delivered a really well-rounded laptop with no obvious flaws. But you'd hope so. I mean, you've got to spend between £1,200 and £1,800 on this thing, so yeah, you'd expect that to be the case. It's superbly well designed, probably the best looking laptop you can get right now. It'll perform more than adequately for anyone who doesn't require super high-end performance. It comes with a great touchscreen and a fantastic pen included, which will please any potential art workers out there. This is definitely something you should shortlist alongside some other considerations like the Dell XPS 13 and the Macbook Air. If you've been enjoying today's video, make sure you give that like button a tickle, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will of course see you in the next one.